A short history of nearly everything. Bill Bryson. Introduction. Welcome and congratulations. I am delighted that you could make it. Getting here wasn't easy, I know. In fact, I suspect it was a little tougher than you realize. To begin with, for you to be here now, trillions of drifting atoms had somehow to assemble in an intricate and intriguingly oblique manner to create you. It's an arrangement so specialized and particular that it has never been tried before and will only exist this once. For the next many years, we hope these tiny particles will uncomplainingly engage in all the billions of deft cooperative efforts necessary to keep you intact and let you experience the supremely agreeable but generally underappreciated state known as existence. Why atoms takes this trouble is a bit of a puzzle. Being you is not a gratifying experience at the atomic level. For all their devoted attention, your atoms don't actually care about you, indeed, don't even know that you are there. They don't even know that they are there. They are mindless particles after all, and not even themselves alive. It is a slightly arresting notion that if you were to pick yourself apart with the tweezers one atom at a time, you would produce a mound of fine atomic dust, none of which had ever been alive, but all of which had once been you. Yet somehow, for the period of your existence, they will answer to a single overarching impulse to keep you you. The bad news is that atoms are fickle and their time of devotion is fleeting indeed. Even a long human life adds up to only about 650,000 hours. And when that modest milestone flashes past, or at some other point thereabouts, for reasons unknown, your atoms will shut you down, silently disassemble, and go off to be other things. And that's it for you. Still, you may rejoice that it happens at all. Generally speaking, in the universe, it doesn't, so far as we can tell. This is decidedly odd because the atoms that so liberally and continually flock together to form living things on Earth are exactly the same atoms that decline to do it elsewhere. Whatever else it may be, at the level of chemistry, life is curiously mundane. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, a little calcium, a dash of sulfur, a light dusting of other very ordinary elements, nothing you would not find in any ordinary drugstore, and that's all you need. The only thing special about the atoms that make you is that they make you. That is, of course, the miracle of life. Whether or not atoms make life in other corners of the universe, they make plenty else. In this, they make everything else. Without them, there would be no water or air or rocks, no stars and planets, no distant gassy clouds or swirling nebulae or any of the other things that make the universe so usefully material. Atoms are so numerous and necessary that we easily overlook that they need not actually exist at all. There is no law that requires the universe to fill itself with small particles of matter or to produce light and gravity and the other physical properties on which our existence hinges. There need not actually be a universe at all. For the longest time, there was not. There was no atoms and no universe for them to float about in. There was nothing at all anywhere. So thank goodness for atoms. But the fact that you have atoms and that they assemble in such a willing manner is only part of what got you here. To be here now, alive in the 21st century and smart enough to know it, you also had to be the beneficiary of an extraordinary string of biological good fortune. Survival on Earth is a surprisingly tricky business of the billions and billions of species of living things that have existed since the dawn of time. Most 99.99% are no longer around. Life on Earth, you see, is not only brief but dismayingly tenuous. It is a curious feature of our existence that we come from a planet that is very good at promoting life, but even better at extinguishing it. The average species on Earth lasts for only about 4 million years, so if you wish to be around for billions of years, you must be as fickle as the atoms that made you. You must be prepared to change everything about yourself shape, size, color, species, affiliation, everything, and to do so repeatedly. That's much easier said than done because the process of change is random. To get from protoplasmal, primordial, atomic lobule, as the Gilbert and Sullivan song put it, to sentient, upright modern human has required you to mutate new traits over and over in a precisely timely manner for an exceedingly long while. So, at various periods over the last 3.8 billion years, we have absorbed oxygen and then dotted on it, grown fins and limbs and jaunty sails, laid eggs, flicked the air with a forked tongue, been sleek, been furry, lived underground, lived in trees, been as big as a deer and as small as a mouse, and a million things more. The tiniest deviation from any of those evolutionary shifts, and you might now be licking algae from cave walls, or lolling walrus like on some stony shore, or disgorging air through a blowhole in the top of your head before diving 60 feet for a mouthful of delicious sandworms. Not only have you been lucky enough to be attached since time immemorial to your favored evolutionary line, but you have also been extremely make that miraculously fortunate in your personal ancestry. Consider the fact that for 3.8 billion years, a period of time older than the Earth's mountains and rivers and oceans, every one of your forebears on both sides has been attractive enough to find a mate, healthy enough to reproduce, and sufficiently blessed by fate and circumstances to live long enough to do so. Not one of your pertinent ancestors was squashed, devoured, drowned, starved, stranded, stuck fast, untimely wounded, or otherwise deflected from its life's quest of delivering a tiny charge of genetic material to the right partner at the right moment in order to perpetuate the only possible sequence of hereditary combinations that could result eventually, astoundingly, and all too briefly in you. This is a book about how it happened, in particular, how we went from there being nothing at all to there being something, and then how a little of that something turned into us, and also some of what happened in between and since. That's a great deal to cover, of course, which is why the book is called A Short History of Nearly Everything, even though it is not really. It could not be, but with luck, by the time we finish it, will feel as if it is. My own starting point, for what it's worth, was an illustrated science book that I had as a classroom text when I was in 4th or 5th grade. The book was a standard issue 1950s school book, battered, unloved, grimly hefty, but near the front it had an illustration that just captivated me. A cutaway diagram showing the Earth's interior as it would look if you cut into the planet with a large knife and carefully withdrew a wedge representing about a quarter of its bulk. It's hard to believe that there was ever a time when I had not seen such an illustration before, but evidently I had not, for I clearly remember being transfixed. I suspect, in honesty, my initial interest was based on a private image of streams of unsuspecting eastbound motorists in the American Plain States plunging over the edge of a sudden 4,000-mile high cliff running between Central America and the North Pole, but gradually my attention did turn in a more scholarly manner to the scientific import of the drawing and realization that the Earth consisted of discrete layers ending in the center with a glowing spear of iron and nickel, which was as hot as the surface of the sun, according to the caption, and I remember thinking with real wonder, how do they know that? I didn't doubt the correctness of the information for an instant. I still tend to trust the pronouncements of scientists in the way I trust those of surgeons, plumbers, and other possessors of arcane and privileged information. But I could not for the life of me conceive how any human mind could work out what spaces thousands of miles below us that no eye had ever seen and no X ray could penetrate could look like and be made of. To me, that was just a miracle that has been my position with science ever since. Excited, I took the book home that night and opened it before dinner, an action that I expect prompted my mother to feel my forehead and ask if I was alright, and starting with the first page I read. And here's the thing, I wasn't exciting at all. It wasn't actually altogether comprehensible. Above all, it didn't answer any of the questions that the illustration stirred up in a normal inquiring mind. How did we end up with the sun in the middle of our planet? And if it is burning away down there, why isn't the ground under our feet hot to the touch? And why isn't the rest of the interior melting, or is it? And when the core at last burns itself out, will some of the earth slump into the void, leaving a giant sinkhole on the surface? And how did you know this? How did you figure it out? But the author was strangely silent on such details indeed, silent on everything but anticlines, synclines, axial falls, and the like. It was as if he wanted to keep the good stuff secret by making all of it soberly unfathomable. As the years passed, I began to suspect that this was not altogether a private impulse. There seemed to be a mystifying universal conspiracy among textbook authors to make certain the material they dealt with never strayed too near the realm of the mildly interesting and was always at least a long distance phone call from the frankly interesting. I now know that there is a happy abundance of science writers who pen the most lucid and thrilling prose. Timothy Ferris, Richard Forte, and Tim Flannery are three that jump out from a single station of the alphabet, and does not even to mention the late but godlike Richard Feynman. But sadly, none of them wrote any textbook I ever used. All mine were written by men. It was always men who held the interesting notion that everything became clear when expressed as a formula, and the amusingly deluded belief that the children of America would appreciate having chapters end with a section of questions they could mull over in their own time. So I grew up convinced that science was supremely dull, but suspecting that it need not be, and not really think about it at all if I could help it. This too became my position for a long time. Then, much later, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was on a long flight across the Pacific, staring idly out the window at moonlit ocean, when it occurred to me with a certain uncomfortable forcefulness that I did not know the first thing about the only planet I was ever going to live on. I had no idea, for example, why the oceans were salty but the Great Lakes were not. Did not have the faintest idea. I didn't know if the oceans were growing more salty with time or less, and whether ocean salinity levels was something I should be concerned about or not. I am very pleased to tell you that until the late 1970s, scientists did not know the answers to these questions either. They just did not talk about it very audibly. And ocean salinity, of course, represented only the merest silver of my ignorance. I did not know what a proton was or a protein, did not know a quark from a quasar, did not understand how geologists could look at a layer of rock on a canyon wall and tell you how old it was, did not know anything really. I became gripped by a quiet, unwanted urge to know a little about these matters and to understand how people figured them out. That to me remained the greatest of all amazements. How scientists work things out. How does anybody know how much the earth weighs or how old its rocks are or what really is way down there in the center? How can they know how and when the universe started and what it was like when it did? How do they know what goes on inside an atom and how come to that, or perhaps above all, can scientists so often seem to know nearly everything but then still can't predict an earthquake or even tell us whether we should take an umbrella with us to the races next Wednesday? So I decided that I would devote a portion of my life, 3 years as it now turns out, to reading books and journals and finding saintly, patient experts prepared to answer a lot of outstandingly dumb questions. The idea was to see if it is not possible to understand and appreciate, marvel at, enjoy even the wonder and accomplishments of science at a level that is not too technical or demanding but isn't entirely superficial either. That was my idea and my hope, and that is the what the book that follows is intended to be. Anyway, we have a great deal of ground to cover and much less than 6,50,000 hours in which to do it, so let's begin.